What are the tools used to draw architectural diagram?
There are a few different tools you can use to draw architectural diagrams, and the best one. Okay, so you could go with something simple like Microsoft Paint or Google Drawings if you just need basic shapes and lines. Or, for more advanced features and templates, there are specialized tools like Lucidchart or Draw.io. And if you're comfortable with coding, Plant.uml lets you create diagrams with text. Let me know if you'd like more details on any of these.
When getting requirements, how will you handle design?
Alright, so when I get requirements, I'll start by making sure I really understand what the user needs. I might ask some questions to clarify things. Once I have a good handle on that, I'll start thinking about the overall structure and how the different parts will fit together. I'll probably sketch out a few different ideas to see what works best. Then, I'll get more specific about the details, like what each screen will look like and how the user will interact with it. I'll definitely keep the user in mind throughout the whole process to make sure the design is easy and enjoyable for them to use.
Main design principles, microservices point of view.
Okay, so from a microservices perspective, there are a few key design principles to keep in mind. First, each microservice should focus on doing one thing really well. That's the single responsibility principle. Second, they should be able to work independently without relying too much on each other. That's loose coupling. You'll also want to think about how they'll communicate, maybe using APIs or messaging. Finally, it's important to design for failure, since individual services might go down. Do you want to hear about how these principles apply in a real-world scenario?
Can you name the design principles?
Sure thing. We've got the single responsibility principle, where each microservice focuses on one job. Then there's loose coupling, meaning they don't rely too heavily on each other. Communication is key, so we think about how they'll talk to each other, maybe with APIs or messaging. And last up, we plan for failure, because sometimes services go down.
What are some design patterns for designing microservices?
You got it. One popular one is the database per service pattern. That's where each microservice has its own database. Another is the API gateway pattern, which acts like a single entry point for all your microservices. You might also hear about the circuit breaker pattern, which helps prevent failures from spreading across your system. If you want, I can give you some examples of how these patterns are used in real-world applications.
Continue with other patterns.
Alright, another one to consider is the Saga pattern. That's useful when you have a long transaction that spans multiple microservices. You might also want to look into the CQRS pattern that stands for Command Query Responsibility Segregation. It basically separates the operations that read data from the ones that modify it. We can keep going if you want to hear about more patterns.
Yeah, keep going.
Alright, so another one is the Strangler Fig pattern. That's when you gradually replace parts of a legacy system with new microservices. There's also the backends for frontends pattern. That's where you create separate microservices for different user interfaces. We can keep going if you want to hear about more patterns.
Yeah, keep going.
One more pattern is the event sourcing pattern. That's when you store every change to the state of your application as a sequence of events. And there's also the Command Query Responsibility Segregation pattern, which separates the operations that read data from the ones that modify it.
What is blue and green deployment pattern?
Blue/green deployment is a technique that reduces downtime and risk when releasing new software. You keep two identical production environments running, one live, blue, and one idle, green. You deploy the new version to the idle environment and test it. Once you're confident, you switch traffic to the new environment, making it live. If there are issues, you can quickly switch back to the old environment.
What is orchestration design pattern?
The orchestration pattern is like having a conductor for your microservices. It's a central place that tells each service what to do and when to do it. This is really helpful when you have complex processes that involve lots of different services working together.
You have to update a profile using profile microservice, talking with a statement microservice. Profile is working, other is not working. How do you handle this?
Okay, that sounds tricky. If the profile microservice is working, that's a good start. The issue seems to be with the statement microservice. To figure out what's going on, you could start by checking the logs of the statement microservice for any error messages. You might also want to test the connection between the two services to make sure they can communicate properly. Would you like me to help you troubleshoot the connection between the two services?
Well, is there any pattern which you can follow when it comes to parent to child?
There are a few. When it comes to Chennai, it's a city that beautifully blends tradition with modernity. You'll find ancient temples alongside contemporary art galleries, and the aroma of filter coffee mingles with the scent of jasmine flowers. It's a place where you can explore the rich history of South India and also experience the energy of a bustling metropolis.
How do you handle parent to child when child microservice is failing?
You could use a circuit breaker pattern. Basically, if the child microservice fails repeatedly, the parent service stops sending requests for a while. This gives the child service a chance to recover and prevents a cascade of failures.
Okay, what are different services available in GCP? Say in detail.
GCP's compute engine lets you create and run virtual machines on Google's infrastructure. Cloud storage is great for storing all sorts of data, from website content to backups. If you're working with containers, Kubernetes engine makes it easy to deploy and manage them. And BigQuery is a powerful tool for analyzing large data sets. Finally, AI platform provides tools and services for building and deploying machine learning models.
Okay, tell me Kubernetes concept and commands you know in Kubernetes.
Okay, so Kubernetes is all about managing containers. It lets you run your applications in these little packages called containers. And Kubernetes takes care of things like starting them up, making sure they stay running, and scaling them up if you get a lot of traffic. As for commands, kubectl get pods is a classic. It shows you all the running containers in your cluster. Kubectl create deployment lets you start a new application. And kubectl scale deployment is how you add or remove containers as needed.
Given a collection in Java 8, employees, you need to filter age greater than 50. How will you do that?
Okay, so in Java 8 you can use streams to filter a collection of employees based on their age. First, you'd create a stream from the collection, then use the filter method with a lambda expression to check if each employee's age is greater than 50. Finally, you can collect the filtered employees into a new list.
Okay, instead of collecting as list, I need to print. How do you do that?
Instead of collecting the filtered employees into a list, you can use the for-each method to iterate over the stream and print each employee directly. This way, you avoid creating an intermediate list and can immediately display the results.
Okay, I need to filter age greater than 35 and update another field within the collection called type to another type.
Alright, so you can still use streams for this. First, filter the employees with ages over 35. Then, use the for-each method to iterate through those employees and update their type field. If you need to collect the modified employees into a new list, you can use the collect method after the for-each.
How to ensure a thread-safe application in Java, Spring Boot?
Alright, so to make sure your Spring Boot app is thread-safe, you'll want to focus on a few key things. First off, avoid using instance variables in your controllers or services. Those can cause problems when multiple threads try to access them at the same time. Instead, stick to local variables or thread local storage. Also, if you're dealing with shared resources like databases or caches, make sure you're using proper synchronization techniques like locks or atomic operations. And finally, keep an eye out for any external dependencies or libraries you're using. Those could introduce thread safety issues if they're not designed with concurrency in mind.
In Spring Boot, how do you handle exception?
Spring Boot offers a few ways to handle exceptions. You can use an exception handler within a controller to handle specific exceptions thrown by its methods. For global exception handling, @controller advice comes in handy, allowing you to centralize exception handling logic across your application. You can also create custom exception classes to represent specific error conditions in your application.
How to ensure memory leak and how to ensure application doesn't take more memory in cloud?
Memory leaks can cause your application to slow down and eventually crash. To prevent them, make sure you're properly closing resources like database connections and file streams when you're done with them. Using a profiler tool can help you identify memory leaks by showing you where objects are being created and not garbage collected. As for keeping your application's memory usage in check on the clouds, start by right-sizing your cloud instances. Choose the smallest instance type that meets your application's needs, and then scale up if needed. Monitoring your application's memory usage with cloud monitoring tools is also crucial. Set up alerts to notify you if memory usage goes above a certain threshold.
What are GCP's cloud monitoring tool?
Google Cloud's main monitoring tool is called Cloud Monitoring. It collects metrics, logs, and events from your GCP resources and applications. You can use it to create dashboards, set up alerts, and troubleshoot performance issues. There's also Cloud Logging for log management and Cloud Trace for tracing request latency in your applications.
Your developer in your team made some changes which is causing memory leak. How do you identify it?
Okay, memory leaks can be tricky. First, you'll want to use a profiler tool. There are some great open source ones like Visual VM or Yorkit. These tools can show you exactly where in your code objects are being created and, more importantly, where they're not being released. Once you've got the profiler running, you'll be able to see the heap memory usage over time. A healthy application will have its memory usage go up and down as objects are created and garbage collected. A memory leak, on the other hand, will show a steady increase in memory usage that never goes back down. Another good practice is to do regular code reviews, especially focusing on areas where you're handling resources like database connections or file streams.
What was the issue in vulnerability of Log4j?
Log4j had a critical vulnerability called Log4Shell. It allowed attackers to remotely execute code on vulnerable systems. Basically, if the application logged certain user-controlled data, an attacker could inject special code that would then be executed by the server. This could lead to data breaches, system compromise, and all sorts of other badness.
What are some procedures followed using Agile project?
So in an Agile project, there are a few key procedures that teams usually follow. First up, you've got your sprint planning meetings where the team decides what they'll work on in the upcoming sprint. Then, there are daily stand-up meetings, quick check-ins to see how everyone's progressing. You'll also have sprint reviews to show stakeholders what you've accomplished, and sprint retrospectives to figure out what went well and what could be better.
What are some DevOps tools to make sure your build gets deployed to cloud environment?
There are a bunch of DevOps tools that can help with that. Jenkins is a popular one. It's an open source automation server that can handle building, testing, and deploying your code. Then you've got Docker for containerizing your applications, which makes them super portable. For infrastructure as code, Terraform is a great choice. It lets you define and manage your cloud resources using code. And for configuration management, Ansible can help you automate the setup and configuration of your servers.
What are some issue management tools?
There are a few popular ones out there. Jira is a classic choice, especially for agile teams. Trello is another great option if you prefer a more visual, Kanban-style approach. And then there's Asana, which is known for its flexibility and ease of use.
What is pod and architecture of Kubernetes?
Okay, so in Kubernetes, a pod is the smallest unit you can deploy. Think of it like a wrapper around one or more containers. Now, as for the architecture, you've got your control plane, which is like the brain of the operation. It manages the whole cluster. Then there are worker nodes, which are the machines where your pods actually run.
Okay, explain Kafka and how is it different from other messaging event-driven architecture?
Kafka is basically a distributed streaming platform, so it's really good at handling real-time data feeds. Think of it like a super fast highway for messages. Now, the big difference between Kafka and other messaging systems is that Kafka stores the messages for a longer period of time. This lets multiple applications process the same data at their own pace.
Okay, in GCP, more memory usage is seen. How do you optimize it?
If you're noticing high memory usage on GCP, there are a few things you can try. First, make sure you've chosen the right size virtual machine for your application. If you're running a Java application, you might want to adjust the heap size to better fit your needs. Also, take a look at your application's code to see if there are any memory leaks or areas where you could optimize memory usage.
What is a solid design pattern?
SOLID is actually an acronym for 5 key principles in object-oriented design. They are single responsibility, open/closed, Liskov substitution, interface segregation, and dependency inversion. These principles help you create software that's easier to maintain, extend, and test. Do you want me to go into more detail about any of them?
Yes, I want details on all of them.
Okay, let's start with the single responsibility principle. This basically means that a class should have only one reason to change. So if a class handles multiple tasks, it's better to split it into smaller, more focused classes. This makes your code easier to understand and maintain. Next up is the open/closed principle. This one says that software entities should be open for extension, but closed for modification. In simpler terms, you should be able to add new functionality without changing the existing code. Moving on to the Liskov substitution principle. This one's a bit of a mouthful, but it basically means that you should be able to replace a parent class with any of its child classes without breaking your code. This is important for ensuring that your inheritance relationships are well designed. Then we have the interface segregation principle. This states that clients should not be forced to depend on interfaces they don't use. It's better to have multiple smaller interfaces than a single large one. Finally, there's the dependency inversion principle. This one says that high-level modules should not depend on low-level modules. Both should depend on abstractions. This helps to reduce coupling between different parts of your code. Do you want me to give you some examples of how these principles are applied in real-world scenarios?
No, that's okay. How do you ensure thread safety in a Java application with Spring Boot?
Alright, so to make sure your Spring Boot app is thread safe, you'll want to focus on a few key things. First off, avoid using instance variables in your controllers or services. Those can cause problems when multiple threads try to access them at the same time. Instead, stick to local variables or thread local storage. Also, if you're dealing with shared resources like databases or caches, make sure you're using proper synchronization techniques like locks or atomic operations. And finally, keep an eye out for any external dependencies or libraries you're using. Those could introduce thread safety issues if they're not designed with concurrency in mind.
Okay, classify Java collections as ordered, sorted, unordered, unsorted, and thread safe. So how do you explain each and every collection?
Okay, let's break down Java collections based on those properties. First up, ordered collections maintain the order in which elements are added. Think of a line at a store. First come, first served. Examples include array list and linked list. Sorted collections, on the other hand, arrange elements based on their values. It's like a dictionary where words are arranged alphabetically. TreeSet and TreeMap are your go-to collections for sorted data. Now, unordered collections don't guarantee any specific order. It's like a bag of marbles, you grab them randomly. HashSet and HashMap fall into this category. Unsorted is a bit different. It just means the collection doesn't try to sort the elements, but it might still have some underlying order. Array list and linked list are also considered unsorted, since you can add elements in any order you like. Finally, thread-safe collections can handle multiple threads accessing them simultaneously without causing problems. Vector and Hashtable are examples of thread-safe collections.
What is consumer in Java 8?
In Java 8, a consumer is a functional interface that represents an operation that accepts a single input argument and returns no result. Think of it like a one-way street for data. You give it something, and it does something with it, but you don't get anything back. It's often used with streams when you want to perform an action on each element, like printing it to the console or updating a value.
Okay, what is CQRS error? Why you shouldn't use allow origin star?
Okay, so CQRS stands for Command Query Responsibility Segregation. It's a pattern that separates read and write operations for a data store. Basically, you have one model for handling commands, writes, and another for handling queries, reads. This can improve performance and scalability, especially in complex applications. Now about that CORS error. The access control allow origin header with a wildcard asterisk is a security risk. It basically tells the browser to allow any website to make requests to your API. This is fine for public APIs, But for anything that involves sensitive data or user authentication, you want to be more specific. You should list the exact origins that are allowed to make requests to your API.
For example?
Sure. Imagine you're building an e-commerce platform. You might have a customer model that includes both customer details and order history. With CQRS, you'd split this into two models. One for customer management, like updating addresses, and another for order management, like viewing order history. This way, you can optimize each model for its specific purpose.
How do you deploy an application to cloud using GCP?
There are a few ways to deploy an application to Google Cloud. One popular method is using Cloud Run, which lets you deploy containerized applications quickly. You can also deploy virtual machines using Compute Engine or use Kubernetes Engine to manage a cluster of containers.
Okay, what is cross-cutting in microservices?
Cross-cutting concerns are things that affect multiple parts of your application, like logging, security, or error handling. In a microservices architecture, you want to avoid duplicating this code in every service. Instead, you can use patterns like API gateways or service meshes to handle these concerns in a centralized way.
What are ways you can create a Spring Boot project?
There are a couple of ways you can do this. The easiest is using Spring Initializer, which is a web-based tool that lets you select your dependencies and generate a project structure. You can also use your IDE. Most of them have built-in support for creating Spring Boot projects.
What is a singleton class and can it have a serializable interface?
A singleton class is a special type of class that can only have one instance throughout its entire lifecycle. It's like having a single president of a country. There's only one, and everyone knows who it is. And yes, a singleton class can definitely implement the serializable interface. This allows you to save the state of the singleton object to a file, or send it over a network. However, you need to be careful to maintain the singleton property, even after deserialization.
How do you maintain that if it's a serializable interface, how do you maintain that it's still a singleton?
You can maintain the singleton property during deserialization by implementing the read-resolve method in your singleton class. This method is automatically called when an object is deserialized. Inside read-resolve, you can simply return the existing singleton instance, effectively preventing the creation of a new instance.
How do you implement read-resolve?
Okay, so to implement read-resolve, you first need to make sure your singleton class implements the serializable interface. Then, you simply add the read-resolve method to your class. Inside the method, you just return the existing singleton instance. Here's a basic example. Private static final mySingleton instance equals new mySingleton. Private mySingleton / private constructor. Public static mySingleton get instance. Return instance. Private object read-resolve. Return instance / other methods. Closing curly bracket.
Okay, imagine you have to create an apartment. What are the design patterns involved in it using a code?
Alright, let's build this apartment with some design patterns. First up, we'll use the builder pattern to construct the apartment. Think of it like a step-by-step process where we add features like bedrooms, bathrooms, and a kitchen. This makes it easy to create different apartment configurations without having a bunch of constructors. Next, we'll use the facade pattern to create a simplified interface for the apartment. Imagine you have a complex system with plumbing, electrical, and HVAC. The facade would be like a single apartment control panel that lets you easily manage everything. Finally, we can use the observer pattern to handle events. Let's say we have a security system that needs to notify residents about a fire alarm. The observer pattern would allow the security system to subscribe residents and send them notifications when needed. Would you like me to show you some example code for any of these patterns?
No, that's okay. Can you classify the structural and behavioral patterns?
Sure. Let's break down some common design patterns into structural and behavioral categories. Structural patterns are all about how objects are composed to form larger structures. Think of it like building blocks. Some examples include adapter, bridge, composite, decorator, and facade. Behavioral patterns, on the other hand, focus on how objects communicate and interact with each other. It's like the rules of engagement between different parts of your system. Examples include chain of responsibility, command, iterator, mediator, and observer. Would you like me to elaborate on any of these patterns?
Say some brief case study on each of them.
Alright, let's dive into some real-world examples to make these patterns crystal clear. First up, the adapter pattern. Imagine you're building a weather app. You want to display weather data from different sources, but each source provides the data in a different format. The adapter pattern acts as a translator, converting each source's data into a common format that your app can understand. Next, the bridge pattern. Think of a drawing application that can create shapes in different colors. The bridge pattern decouples the shape from the color, allowing you to easily add new shapes or colors without modifying existing code. Moving on to the composite pattern. Consider a file system. You have files and folders can contain other files and folders. The composite pattern allows you to treat individual files and folders as a single entity, making it easy to perform operations like calculating the total size of a directory. Then there's the decorator pattern. Imagine you're building a coffee ordering system. You start with a basic coffee and then add decorators like milk, sugar, or whipped cream. The decorator pattern lets you add these extra features dynamically without modifying the original coffee class. Finally, the facade pattern. Think of a home theater system. You have a TV, DVD player, speakers, and an amplifier. The facade pattern provides a simple interface to control all these devices with a single remote, hiding the complexity of the underlying system. Would you like some more examples?
No, that's okay. Can you explain concurrency on a LRU cache?
Sure. Concurrency in an LRU cache means that multiple threads can access the cache at the same time without causing any issues. This is important for applications that need to handle a lot of requests quickly. To achieve concurrency, LRU caches typically use techniques like locks or concurrent data structures to ensure that only one thread can modify the cache at a time. This prevents data corruption and ensures that the cache remains consistent.
Okay, explain how Kafka works.
Okay, so Kafka is like a super fast, super reliable messaging system. Think of it as a giant pipeline for data. Here's the gist. First, you have producers. These are like factories that create messages and send them into Kafka. Then, you have brokers. These are the workhorses of Kafka. They store the messages and make sure they're available. Finally, you have consumers. These are like the customers who take the messages from Kafka and do something with them. Kafka uses a system of topics and partitions to organize the messages, and is designed to handle huge amounts of data in real time.
What are topics and partitions?
Alright, so in Kafka, topics are like categories or feeds. Think of them as different channels for your data. For example, you might have a customer_orders topic or a website_clicks topic. Now, partitions are where things get interesting. Each topic is divided into partitions, which are like smaller, ordered logs. This allows Kafka to distribute the data across multiple brokers, making it super scalable and fault-tolerant. Think of it like a newspaper. The topic is the newspaper itself, and the partitions are the different sections like sports, business, or world news. Each section can be handled independently, but together they make up the whole paper.
Okay, explain architectural patterns for microservices and explain each one with an example.
Alright, let's explore some key architectural patterns for microservices. First up, the API gateway pattern. Think of this as the front door to your microservices. It handles all incoming requests, routing them to the appropriate service. It can also handle things like authentication, rate limiting, and caching. For example, Netflix uses an API gateway to manage requests from its various streaming devices. Next, the backend for front ends, BFF pattern. This pattern suggests creating separate backend services for different user interfaces. So you might have one BFF for your web app and another for your mobile app. This allows you to tailor the backend to the specific needs of each front end. For instance, an e-commerce site might have a BFF for its desktop website and another for its mobile app, optimizing each for the respective user experience. Then there's the circuit breaker pattern. In a microservices architecture, if one service fails, it can cause a cascading failure throughout the system. The circuit breaker pattern prevents this by stopping requests to a failing service for a certain period, giving it time to recover. Think of it like a fuse box in your house, preventing a power surge from damaging your appliances. For example, Amazon uses circuit breakers to prevent failures in its recommendation engine from affecting the entire shopping experience. Finally, the event sourcing pattern. This pattern involves storing every change to your application state as an event. This allows you to easily rebuild the state of your application at any point in time. For instance, a banking app might use event sourcing to track every transaction, making it easy to audit and replay transactions if needed. Do you want to delve deeper into any of these patterns or explore others?
That's okay. What tools are used in an enterprise? Is it Kafka or RabbitMQ? Compare both.
Both Kafka and RabbitMQ are popular tools in enterprise settings, but they serve slightly different purposes. Kafka is a distributed streaming platform, great for handling high volumes of real-time data. Think of it like a fire hose of information. RabbitMQ, on the other hand, is a message broker, focusing on reliable message delivery between applications. It's more like a postal service, ensuring each message gets to its destination. So when choosing, consider your needs. If you're dealing with massive data streams, Kafka is your best bet. If you need guaranteed message delivery and more complex routing, RabbitMQ might be the better choice.
How do you ensure cloud adoption?
Okay, so successful cloud adoption is all about having a solid plan. Start by clearly defining your goals for moving to the clouds. What do you hope to achieve? Then, assess your current infrastructure and identify what needs to change. It's also crucial to get buy-in from all stakeholders, from the top down. Training your team is key, so they have the skills to work in a cloud environment. Finally, don't forget about security. Make sure you have robust measures in place to protect your data in the clouds.
What is DevOps and what will you do to set up basic DevOps?
DevOps is really about bringing development and operations teams closer together so they can build, test, and release software faster and more reliably. To get started with basic DevOps, you'll want to automate as much as possible. Think about using tools for continuous integration and continuous delivery, like Jenkins or GitLab CI/CD. Infrastructure as code tools like Terraform or CloudFormation can also help you manage your infrastructure more efficiently. And don't forget, monitoring and logging tools like Prometheus and Grafana can give you valuable insights into your application's performance.
What is the difference between a snapshot and a release candidate?
A snapshot is like a rough draft. It's a version of your software that's still being actively worked on. A release candidate, on the other hand, is much closer to the final product. It's gone through most of the testing and is considered stable enough for the public to try out.
What is caching and what is cache eviction?
Caching is like keeping frequently used items close at hand so you can grab them quickly. In computing, it's about storing copies of data in a fast access location, like RAM, so you don't have to go all the way to the slower storage every time. Now, cache eviction is what happens when the cache gets full. You need to make room for new stuff, so you kick out the old data. There are different strategies for this, like least recently used, where you get rid of the data that hasn't been accessed in a while.
What are some server level administration within a Linux based system, and what are shell scripts which will be used?
Alright, so when it comes to server level administration in Linux, you're looking at tasks like managing user accounts, handling file permissions, and keeping an eye on system resources. Now, shell scripts are your best friend for automating these tasks. They're basically a series of commands that the shell can execute. You can use them for anything from backing up files to automating software installations. Bash is the most common shell, so most scripts are written in that.
How do you analyze server performance when it comes to Google Cloud Platform?
On Google Cloud, you've got a few solid options for monitoring server performance. Cloud monitoring is a great starting point. It gives you dashboards and alerts for things like CPU usage, memory, and disk I/O. For a deeper dive, CloudTrace can help you pinpoint bottlenecks in your application code. And if you're running Kubernetes, Anthos Service Mesh provides detailed metrics and logs for your microservices.
What is log automation?
Log automation is all about making the process of collecting, analyzing, and managing log data more efficient. Instead of manually sifting through log files, you use tools and scripts to do the heavy lifting. This helps you quickly identify issues, spot trends, and even predict potential problems before they cause major headaches.
Define a B2B system which can make my distributor order and enable self-help, top-down or bottom-up. Why tech stack?
Okay, let's break down how to build a B2B system for your distributors. First, you'll want a user-friendly interface so your distributors can easily place orders. Think about a clean design with clear product categories and search functionality. Next, you'll need a robust order management system to track orders, manage inventory, and handle payments. This is where things like real-time inventory updates and automated order confirmations come in handy. For self-help, consider adding a knowledge base or FAQ section with answers to common questions. You could also include tutorials or videos to help distributors navigate the system. Now for the tech stack, you could use a cloud-based platform like AWS or Google Cloud for scalability and reliability. For the front end, React or Angular are great choices, and for the back end, Python or Node.js would work well. You'll also need a database like PostgreSQL or MySQL to store all that order and product information. As for the approach, a bottom-up approach might be best. Start by building the core ordering functionality and then add features based on distributor feedback. This way, you can ensure the system meets their specific needs.
What is B2B implementation for multiple user countries?
For a B2B system that spans multiple countries, you'll need to think about localization. That means supporting different languages, currencies, and tax regulations. You'll also want to consider regional differences in shipping and payment options. A good content delivery network can help ensure fast loading times for users around the world. Finally, make sure your system complies with data privacy laws in each country you operate in.
What is architecture-related tools like Draw.io and Archimate?
Tools like Link2Draw.io and Archimate are super helpful for visualizing and planning out software and system architectures. Link2Draw.io is a general-purpose diagramming tool that's great for creating flowcharts, network diagrams, and even basic UML diagrams. Archimate, on the other hand, is more specialized. It's designed for enterprise architecture and helps you model complex business processes and IT systems.
What is TOGAF and how do you complete a TOGAF examination?
TOGAF stands for the Open Group Architecture Framework. It's a really popular framework for developing enterprise architectures. Think of it like a set of guidelines and best practices for designing and managing complex IT systems. As for the exam, it's designed to test your knowledge of the TOGAF standard. It's a multiple choice exam, and you'll need to demonstrate your understanding of the core concepts and principles. There are also different levels of certification, so you can choose the one that best fits your...
What are some basic core concepts and principles?
TOGAF's core concepts revolve around developing and managing an enterprise architecture. It emphasizes aligning IT with business goals. Some key principles include: first, there's the Architecture Development Method, or ADMIRAL. This is a step-by-step process for creating and managing an architecture. Then there's the Architecture Content Framework, which provides a structured way to organize architectural artifacts. Finally, TOGAF stresses the importance of governance to ensure the architecture is implemented and maintained effectively.
What is the architectural governance process?
Architectural governance is all about making sure that the architecture of an organization's IT systems is aligned with its business goals and that it's being implemented and maintained effectively. It's like having a set of rules and guidelines to ensure that everyone is on the same page and that the architecture is meeting the needs of the business.
What is GraphQL?
GraphQL is a query language for APIs. Imagine you're ordering food at a restaurant. With GraphQL, you can tell the kitchen exactly what you want on your plate, instead of getting a preset meal. This makes your requests more efficient and helps you avoid getting extra data you don't need.
Where will you use APIs?
APIs are used everywhere these days. Think about booking a flight online. The website uses APIs to check for available seats and pricing. Or when you post a photo to social media, APIs help display that photo on your friends' feeds. They're basically the invisible glue that connects different software applications together.
Okay, how will the performance work with APIs?
API performance is all about how quickly and efficiently an API can respond to requests. Things like network latency, server load, and even the complexity of the API itself can all play a role. If an API is slow or unreliable, it can lead to a poor user experience and even cause problems for other applications that rely on it.
Difference between a SOAP and a REST service.
SOAP and REST are both ways for applications to talk to each other, but they do it in different ways. SOAP is a bit more old school and uses XML to send messages, while REST is more modern and flexible, often using JSON. REST is generally simpler and faster to use, which is why it's more popular these days.
How to invoke an API on a page during load.
You can use JavaScript to invoke an API when a page loads. The fetch function is a common way to do this. You'll need to provide the API endpoint and any necessary parameters. Then, you can handle the API's response and update the page's content accordingly.
Okay, what is asynchronous versus synchronous ordering?
Okay, so synchronous ordering is like waiting in line at a store. You place your order and you wait until it's ready before you can do anything else. Asynchronous ordering is more like ordering food for delivery. You place your order and then you can go about your business while you wait for it to arrive.
What is payment integration? 3D payment.
Payment integration is all about connecting your website or app to a payment gateway so you can accept online payments. 3D Secure adds an extra layer of security to online transactions by requiring customers to verify their identity, usually through a one-time password or code.
How are images stored in a site? How are images stored in a site, and how do you do caching of high resolution images? How is images stored in a site, and how do you handle caching high resolution images?
Images on websites are usually stored on a server, either the same one that hosts the website or a separate one. When someone visits the site, their browser downloads the images to display them. For high resolution images, caching is key to speed things up. You can use a content delivery network, CDN, to store copies of your images on servers around the world, so they load faster for visitors no matter where they are. Also, setting appropriate cache headers tells browsers how long to store the images locally, so they don't have to re-download them every time.
How is CDN refreshed?
CDNs refresh their content in a few ways. The most common is based on something called time to live or TTL. Basically, when a CDN stores a copy of your website's files, it assigns a TTL, which is how long that copy is considered valid. When the TTL expires, the CDN checks your website server for a newer version. You can also manually purge or invalidate content on a CDN. This is useful when you need to update something immediately, like if you fix a typo or change a price. Keep in mind that purging too often can actually slow things down, since the CDN has to go back to your server more frequently.
What are some performance issues which normally an architect has to overcome in a microservices-based system with cloud?
Microservices architectures introduce some unique performance challenges. One big one is network latency. Since microservices communicate over the network, delays can add up quickly. Also, managing data consistency across multiple services can be tricky. Architects also need to think about how to scale individual services independently and how to handle failures gracefully. Finally, monitoring and tracing requests across a distributed system can be complex, but it's essential for identifying bottlenecks.
Explain how do you handle. Imagine the cloud is GCP.
Alright, for handling caching in GCP, Cloud CDN is your best bet. It integrates seamlessly with other GCP services like Cloud Storage and Compute Engine. You can configure caching behavior using cache keys and TTLs. For more advanced scenarios, like serving different content based on user location, you can use signed URLs and cookies.
How do you handle performance issues in microservices?
In microservices, you'll want to focus on a few key areas. First, keep an eye on network latency. That's the time it takes for services to communicate. You can use tools like service meshes to optimize this. Also, make sure your databases are performing well, as they're often a bottleneck. Load balancing and auto-scaling can help distribute traffic and handle unexpected spikes. Finally, invest in good monitoring and tracing tools so you can quickly pinpoint and fix any performance issues that arise.
What is tokenization and how it is done? Do you know something about OAuth based?
Tokenization is basically replacing sensitive data with non-sensitive substitutes. Think of it like using a stage name instead of your real name. It's often used with credit card information. Instead of storing the actual card number, you store a token that represents it. This way, if someone hacks into your system, they won't get the real card details. OAuth is a whole other thing. It's a way to give websites or applications limited access to your data without sharing your password. Imagine you want to use a food delivery app. OAuth lets you connect your Google account so the app knows your address, but it doesn't get your password.
How are passwords securely stored, like access keys and passwords securely stored within cloud?
There are a few ways to securely store passwords and access keys in the clouds. One common method is using a secrets management service. These services encrypt your sensitive data and control access to it. You can also use hardware security modules, which are dedicated devices for storing and managing cryptographic keys. It's generally not recommended to store passwords or access keys directly in your application code or configuration files.
How do you store and retrieve it?
There are a few ways to store and retrieve passwords and access keys securely. Cloud providers like AWS, Google Cloud, and Azure offer dedicated services for this. AWS has Secrets Manager, Google Cloud has Secret Manager, and Azure has Key Vault. These services let you store your secrets in encrypted form and control access to them with fine-grained permissions. You can then retrieve these secrets programmatically when your application needs them.
Like, how do you access it? Okay, what is SAML?
You can access secrets programmatically using the cloud provider's API or SDK. For example, in AWS, you'd use the Secrets Manager API or the AWS SDK for your programming language. You'll need to authenticate your application to access the secrets, and then you can retrieve them by their name or ID.
What is SAML and how do you use it?
SAML stands for Security Assertion Markup Language. It's basically a way for websites to trust each other's users. Imagine you want to log into a forum using your Google account. SAML is what makes that seamless connection happen.
Okay, what are some techniques to gather customer requirements?
SAML is a way for websites to trust each other's users. Think of it like a digital handshake. One website vouches for you, so another one knows you are who you say you are. It's commonly used for single sign-on, so you only have to log in once to access multiple applications.
How do you gather customer requirements? Is there any techniques? How do you
There are tons of ways to do this. You could start with interviews or surveys to get direct feedback. Another option is observing how customers use your product or service. You can also analyze support tickets or online reviews to see what people are struggling with. Finally, workshops or focus groups can be great for brainstorming new ideas.
How do you produce artifacts? How do you handle replication in Kubernetes?
There are tons of ways to do this. You could start with interviews or surveys to get direct feedback. Another option is observing how customers use your product or service. You can also analyze support tickets or online reviews to see what people are struggling with.
Okay.
Finally, workshops or focus
Stop.
groups can be great for brainstorming
How do
new
you
ideas.
handle replication in Kubernetes?
Kubernetes has a few built-in ways to handle replication. Replica sets are the most common. They make sure a certain number of identical pods are always running. Deployments are another option, and they use replica sets under the hood. For databases, you'll often use a stateful set, which gives each pod a unique identity and persistence.
Yes, go ahead.
Kubernetes has a few built-in ways to handle replication. Replica sets are the most common. They make sure a certain number of identical pods are always running. Deployments are another option, and they...
How do you scale up horizontally and vertically?
Kubernetes has a few built-in ways to handle replication. Replica sets are the most common. They make sure a certain number of identical pods are always running. Deployments are another option, and they use replica sets under the hood. For databases, you'll often use a stateful set, which gives each pod a unique identity and persistent storage.
How do you handle horizontal and vertical scaling?
Horizontal scaling is like adding more lanes to a highway. You add more machines to handle the load. Vertical scaling is like building a taller skyscraper. You add more resources to a single machine.
How do you do that in Kubernetes? How do you do horizontal and vertical scaling in Kubernetes?
Horizontal scaling is like adding more lanes to a highway. You add more machines to handle the load. Vertical scaling is like building a taller skyscraper. You add more resources to a single machine.
How do you do that in Kubernetes?
For horizontal scaling, Kubernetes uses something called a horizontal pod autoscaler.
For vertical?
It can automatically increase or decrease the number of pods in your application based on metrics like CPU usage. For vertical scaling, you can adjust the resources allocated to your pods in their configuration.
Okay.
For horizontal scaling, Kubernetes uses something called a horizontal pod autoscaler. It can automatically...
How do you
For vertical scaling, you'll need to edit the resource requests and limits in your pod's YAML configuration. This tells Kubernetes to allocate more CPU and memory to them.
How do you achieve
For vertical scaling,
fault
you'll need to
tolerance
edit the
in
resource
Kafka?
requests and limits in your pod's
Stop. How do you achieve fault tolerance in Kafka?
For vertical scaling, you'll need to edit the...
Stop. How do you achieve fault tolerance in Kafka?
There are a few ways to achieve fault tolerance in Kafka. First, you can replicate your data across multiple brokers, so if one goes down, the others still have the data. You can also use something called rack awareness, which spreads your data across different physical locations, so you're protected from things like power outages. Finally, you can configure your producers and consumers to retry if they encounter errors.
What is the role of replication in Kafka?
Replication in Kafka is all about making your data super reliable. It creates copies of your data across multiple brokers. So if one broker has a problem, your data is safe and sound on the others. This ensures your applications keep running smoothly without any data loss.
Explain 12-factor refactoring.
The 12-factor app methodology is a set of best practices for building software as a service, SaaS, applications. It emphasizes things like using a single code base, explicitly declaring dependencies, and keeping configuration separate from code. It's all about making your apps more portable, scalable, and maintainable.
How do you handle issues occurring in cloud?
Cloud issues can be tricky. You'll want to start by checking the cloud provider's status page for any outages. If that's not it, take a look at your application logs and monitoring dashboards to see if there are any errors or performance bottlenecks. You might also want to check if there are any security alerts or misconfigurations. If you're still stuck, reaching out to the cloud provider's support team is a good idea. They can help you troubleshoot and resolve the issue.
What is difference between React and Angular?
React and Angular are both popular tools for building web applications, but they have some key differences. React is a JavaScript library focused on building user interfaces, while Angular is a full-fledged framework that provides a complete solution for building complex applications. React uses a virtual DOM, which makes it very fast, while Angular has a more traditional approach to updating the DOM. Also, React is generally considered easier to learn than Angular.
What is the enterprise architectural roadmap?
An enterprise architecture roadmap is like a detailed plan for how a company's technology will evolve over time. It outlines the current state of the company's systems and applications, where they want to be in the future, and the steps needed to get there. It's a big picture view that helps everyone understand how technology investments will support the business goals.
Explain in detail 12-factor refactoring.
Alright, let's break down the 12-factor app methodology. It's basically a guide for building web applications that are easy to deploy, scale, and maintain. First up, you want a single code base tracked in version control, and you deploy that same code to all your environments. Next, explicitly declare all your app's dependencies. That way, you know exactly what it needs to run. Third, store configuration in the environment, not in your code. Fourth, treat backing services like databases or message queues as attached resources. Fifth, strictly separate the build, release, and run stages of your application. Sixth, execute your app as one or more stateless processes. 7th, export services via port binding. 8th, scale out via the process model. 9th, maximize robustness with fast startup and graceful shutdown. 10th, keep development, staging, and production as similar as possible. 11th, treat logs as event streams. Finally, run admin/management tasks as one-off processes. Following these guidelines will make your app more portable and resilient.
How to create a cloud agnostic application?
To make your application cloud agnostic, you'll need to focus on a few key things. First, use containerization technologies like Docker and Kubernetes. This lets you package your application and its dependencies together, so it can run consistently on any clouds. Second, avoid using vendor-specific services as much as possible. Instead, stick to open source or cloud-neutral tools. Finally, design your application with a microservices architecture. This breaks down your application into smaller, independent services that can be deployed and scaled separately, making it easier to move them between clouds.
How do you decompose a big functionality in a monolith to a smaller ones for microservice?
Decomposing a monolith into microservices is a big project, but it's definitely doable. Start by identifying logical boundaries within your application. Think about breaking it down by business functionality. Then, extract those functionalities into separate, independent services. You'll also need to think about how these services will communicate with each other. APIs are a common choice. Finally, don't try to do it all at once. Take a gradual approach, migrating one piece at a time.
What are some software architectural principles? Explain with examples.
Sure, here are a few common ones. First, there's the separation of concerns principle. It's about breaking down your application into distinct parts, each with its own specific job. Think of it like a car assembly line. Each station focuses on one task, making the whole process more efficient. Another one is DRY, which stands for Don't Repeat Yourself. It's about avoiding code duplication. Imagine you're writing a recipe, and you keep repeating the same steps. It's much better to write them once and refer back to them. Finally, there's KISS, which means keep it simple, stupid. It's about avoiding unnecessary complexity. Think of it like packing for a trip. You don't need to bring everything you own, just the essentials.
What is architectural governance?
Architectural governance is basically a set of rules and processes that ensure your company's technology is aligned with its business goals. It's like having a blueprint for your IT systems and making sure everyone sticks to it. This helps with things like making sure systems are compatible, secure, and cost-effective.
Okay, what are some roles of a software architect?
Software architects have a pretty broad range of responsibilities. They're the ones who design the overall structure of a software system, so they need to have a deep understanding of different technologies and how they fit together. They also have to consider things like scalability, security, and performance. Basically, they're responsible for making sure the software is built to last and meets the needs of the business.
What are some architectural tools for modeling? What is domain-driven design? Do you go for microservices or COTS? What is start for microservices? What is a domain-driven design? What is a domain-driven design?